This week on Enterprise, ratings have been way down, but at least for one episode, we know someone's watching. This is a review of the Star Trek Enterprise episode Observer Effect. If you have not seen this episode and you don't want to know who the watchers are who are watching, be warned. Spoilers beyond this point. How come whenever one of these incorporeal alien species shows up to observe humanity, they always want to watch how we die? Like, maybe they'd learn more if they watched how we live, man. Enterprise is visiting some planet, and we cut to Malcolm and Travis in the mess hall, playing chess, and right away we sense that something's a bit off with these two. They've no sooner started the chess game than they're predicting who will win and in how many moves. They speak with a cool intellectual detachment about human lifespans and how all physical species are basically the same. Travis says, "Do you think anyone will die this time?" And Malcolm says, "Sometimes it's the whole crew, sometimes only just one, but someone always dies." We pick things up with Hoshi and Trip in a shuttle pod on their way back to the ship from the planet. Apparently, the Klingons visited here a few years ago and left behind a big bunch of garbage and shit. Literally, Hoshi also mentions a latrine. They're both anxious to get back to Enterprise and clean up, but before they can dock, Trip is overcome by a coughing fit. Hoshi is forced to take over and fly the pod in, and she calls Enterprise like, "Medical emergency! Commander Tucker has collapsed and is coughing uncontrollably. It's real bad. He's Doc Hollidaying all over the place." Oh, come on. This is supposed to be suspenseful. Who are they kidding? Like they'd ever kill Trip. How many times have I made that joke? At least once before. And I'll do it again. Trip and Hoshi are shoved into the decon chamber, and immediately Hoshi's like, "Should we strip and start rubbing oil on each other?" Phlox is there like, "Down, girl. Let me figure out what's wrong with you first. Jeez." Then Hoshi throws up. I guess all that pent-up sexual energy had to go somewhere. Phlox passes a med kit through into the chamber and tells Trip and Hoshi to take blood samples, because whatever's wrong with him isn't showing up on his standard scan. Elsewhere in the ship, Malcolm and Travis are discussing how other species have responded to having crew members contract the infection that apparently Trip and Hoshi have. Malcolm, who seems to be the more experienced of the two observers, insists that so far, the humans haven't done anything differently than the Klingons did. Travis, who seems more sympathetic to the people they're observing, counters that Captain Archer, unlike the Klingon captain, allowed the infected crew members to return to the ship. Malcolm's like, "But he put them in quarantine. Same diff. If it was up to me, I'd end this observation right here. I've been observing species like this one for hundreds of years. We have nothing more to learn from humans. Bah!" Our two observers decide to split up. Travis goes to interview Trip and Hoshi to see what it's like being infected, and he does this by employing the ingeniously subtle technique of walking up to the window of the decon chamber and saying, "Hey, what's it like being infected?" Trip says, "You're supposed to be on duty and we need to get some sleep, so can you compare the experience of this illness with others you've had? And if you could quantify your level of discomfort by assigning it a number value between..." "You okay, Travis?" "Yes, I am, Travis." Trip closes the shade on the window. Meanwhile, Malcolm tries his luck interviewing Phlox in sickbay about how his efforts to find a treatment for the infection are progressing, but Phlox kicks him out pretty much right away. Do these guys seem really bad at this to anyone else? Back in the decon chamber, Trip, ever the optimist, compares their situation to the Andromeda strain. Hoshi shares a story of how she was temporarily kicked out of Starfleet training after breaking her company commander's arm in a dispute over an illegal poker game she was running. Little late in the series to be telling us how cool Hoshi is, ain't it, fellas? Where's this gangster been hiding for 3.5 years? In sickbay, Phlox has made a breakthrough, though not an encouraging one. He's isolated the cause of the infection, a silicon-based virus. There's no known treatment, and the infection is spreading so quickly that Trip and Hoshi only have about 5 hours to live. We cut to Travis and Malcolm, who have somehow learned that Phlox has identified the virus. Travis notes that Archer doesn't seem like he's going to abandon the infected crew members. Malcolm says, well, then this will probably be one of those everybody dies situations. Should be fun. Travis Observer, whose sympathies for the Enterprise crew are becoming more obvious, suggests to Malcolm Observer that they should possess different crew members to watch the situation unfold from other perspectives. He suggests Phlox and T'Pol, since they're the ones doing most of the work to find a treatment for the virus. Malcolm reluctantly agrees, and we cut back to Trip and Hoshi in the decon chamber. They chat for a bit, then they notice Phlox and T'Pol standing there watching them through the window like a couple of serial killers. Trip's like, can we help you? Phlox and T'Pol explain that they're waiting on test results, so while they had a few minutes, they thought they'd just pop down and see how Trip and Hoshi were feeling, what's their state of mind, and so forth. Trip says, our states of mind would be a lot more positive if you two were back in sickbay trying to keep us from dying instead of silently staring at us like a couple of perverts at a peep show. On the way back to sickbay, Phlox, who is now inhabited by the sympathetic observer who had been in control of Travis, accuses his partner of wanting the humans to fail. T'Pol says it's not a competition. Either the humans are intelligent enough for first contact with us or they're not. Phlox says maybe intelligence isn't the most important thing. Maybe we should change the criteria that decides when first contact is appropriate. And T'Pol says, oh yeah? And who's going to change the criteria? You? The observers leave Phlox and T'Pol to their work and go back to Travis and Malcolm. Themselves, once again, Phlox and T'Pol get their test results and discover that radiation can cure the virus, but the dose needed is so high that it will also kill the patients. That's no good, but they keep working. Meanwhile, the infection is starting to work on Hoshi's mind. She's hallucinating, speaking in multiple languages. Trip snaps her out of it, and she says, I was back in Brazil before I joined Enterprise, teaching my class. Captain Archer called me to duty, and I never got to say goodbye to my students. Trip says, you'll see him again. And Hoshi's like, that was 4 years ago, dude. They ain't in school no more. Only a total dipshit wouldn't have graduated by now, and there were no total dipshits in my class. I told the head of the department, I want a no total dipshits guarantee or I walk, and that was honored, because in academia, we treat each other with consideration and respect. That's how my administrators treated me, and that's how I treated them from the moment I was hired right up until I walked out in the middle of a class to go to outer space. Trip's like, I didn't get most of that. You switched over to Farsi or something about halfway through. A bit later, Hoshi really goes out of her head, breaks the lock on the door, and wanders out into the corridor, which I'm pretty sure is a violation of quarantine. Trip manages to get her back inside before they expose anyone else, and before a delirious Hoshi opens an airlock and decompresses the entire section. But as a result, Phlox has them both heavily sedated. On the bridge, Travis, the sympathetic observer, goes over to his partner Malcolm and says, we can help them. We can stop this virus from killing them. We came here to observe their behavior, not to watch them suffer needlessly. We should do something. Malcolm says, we can't talk here. And Travis says, I know where we can talk, where nobody will be able to see or hear us. And they jump from Travis and Malcolm into Trip and Hoshi in the decon chamber. They both sit up and start arguing about whether or not to help the humans with the virus. Trip, who is now the sympathetic one, insists that the humans don't deserve to suffer like this, that they've demonstrated unique qualities. Hoshi, the more experienced and detached one, says, hey, having to overcome weaknesses like their susceptibility to this virus will drive them to become better than they are. Remember, our ancestors were physical beings like these. Look at us now. In sickbay, Phlox checks the monitor of the decon chamber and notices right away that the heavily sedated Trip and Hoshi should not be up and talking. He listens in to their odd conversation and then does a quick check of their brain waves, which don't appear to be human. He calls Archer and T'Pol in to tell them about this, but when Archer and T'Pol enter, they've been taken over by the observers, and they tell Phlox to cut the shit and tell them how he was able to detect their presence. Phlox is like, you were sedated, but you sat up wide awake and started talking, which I was able to see and hear because you were also in a room that's being audio-visually monitored. The observers are like, yeah, shit, I guess we totally forgot about that. They erase Phlox's memory of their encounter and return to Travis and Malcolm, while Phlox makes plans to attempt a radiation treatment on Trip and Hoshi. To administer the radiation, they'll need to move Trip and Hoshi to sickbay. Phlox and Archer don spacesuits to avoid being exposed to the virus themselves, but then Hoshi makes everything so much more complicated by dying before they can give her the treatment. God, she is just nothing but trouble in this episode. The observers watch this all happening on a video monitor, like, damn, if we'd remembered they had these things, we never would have gotten caught. In order to work more efficiently, Archer has removed his helmet and gloves, so now he's exposed to the virus too. With Hoshi now a stiff, they shove Trip into the scanner and zap him with the radiation. But it doesn't work. Archer tells Phlox to go to the bridge and continue working to find a cure. He remains in sickbay with Trip, who soon dies as well. Then Trip sits up and says, "Hey, Captain, how's it going?" Archer's like, "Trip? You're alive?" Trip says, "Not really. Trip is just my host. I'm an Organian. That means nothing to you, but there are some nerds in the audience jizzing in their adult-sized underoos right now." Trip explains their mission, that they come to this planet to observe how various species react when they encounter this silicon virus. Archer says, "So, you knew there was a deadly virus here, but you didn't warn us about it?" Trip's like, "Our job is just to observe, not interfere. I wanted to warn you about it, but my boss is kind of a dick." Then Hoshi sits up like, "Oh, you are in so much trouble." So Trip is the sympathetic observer and Hoshi is the detached one. Hoshi says, "Whether these people live or die is not our decision to make. We're not supposed to interfere." Archer says, "But if you knew this virus was here, you could have prevented us from getting infected." Hoshi's like, "Then how could we have learned about you? Duh." Archer says, "Maybe talk to us? Get to know us? You might be a highly evolved godlike species, but look what it's done to you. It's stripped you of your compassion, your empathy. Those are the things that give life meaning. Treating empathy like some kind of a weakness doesn't make you a rational super genius. It makes you a fucking monster." Trip says, "That's it, I've had enough. I don't care about our protocol. I'm going to help these people." Hoshi's like, "You're a loose cannon. You're out of order. I'm out of order. You're out of order. If we let these people die, then something really wrong is going on here." Archer says to Hoshi, "If you're here to understand us, then you need to do more than observe. You need to experience compassion for yourself to really know what it means to be human." "Do we also need to experience greed and war and genocide and bigotry?" "Oh no, we totally fixed all of that." So the Organians fix Trip and Hoshi and Archer. Phlox checks him out and confirms the virus is totally gone. He has no idea how or what happened, but somebody will probably figure it out someday. Archer decides to leave a warning beacon near the planet to make sure no other ships will accidentally contract the virus, something the Klingons didn't do when they were here because they're fucking assholes. Meanwhile, the Organian observers are back in control of Travis and Malcolm, though it won't be long before they leave for good to file their reports. Travis's sympathetic observer is eager to start working to change their rules for observing species. Malcolm's observer is worried that humans have had a bad influence on his partner, but Travis says it's a good influence, and that humans have progressed so far that it's time to start working on making an official first contact with them. Malcolm says, "But at the rate they're progressing, we've barely got 5,000 years to get ready." Ha 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 ha. The end. This is kind of a frustrating episode for me. There are elements of it that I really, really like, and there are elements of it that result from writing choices that are so lazy and shit-brained they threaten to drag down the good stuff. Let me start with the good stuff. A while back, I did a batch of reviews of bottle episodes, and this one would have fit there just fine. This is among the most tightly bottled of all bottle episodes. Not only are there no new sets and only a handful of effects shots, there are no guest stars in the episode at all. Other than some background players, this one is 100% in the hands of the regular cast. And it works pretty well. Keeping things confined to the Enterprise for the entire hour gives the episode a tense, claustrophobic feel, which is appropriate given the subject matter, viral infections, quarantines, etc. Despite the lack of guest actors, the script finds a clever way of introducing guest characters through the conceit of having disembodied aliens possess members of the crew. I admire how the two Organians are established as individuals with distinct personalities and outlooks, and how those characters are transferred between various actors, yet they remain recognizable. When they jump from Travis and Malcolm to Phlox and to Paul, or to Trip and Hoshi, it takes a line or two for us to work out which one is which, but that becomes part of the fun of the episode. And it's a little thing that compels our attention. Oh, they're in different bodies now. Which one is Trip? Okay, he's the nice one. I also like how the episode plays with the dynamics between the characters. We start out with the more experienced observer possessing Malcolm and the junior observer possessing Travis, a power dynamic that matches that of the real Malcolm and Travis, with Malcolm being the senior officer between them. But when they move over to Trip and Hoshi, it's reversed. Now Hoshi, the younger, less experienced one, is the host for the senior observer, and the more experienced Trip is the junior partner. It doesn't give the actors an opportunity to chew the scenery the same way other possessed crew member episodes have done, since both these Organians are fairly even-tempered, but it's still a bit of a change-up, which I appreciate, especially at this point in the series. Speaking of late series change-ups, I enjoyed Hoshi's reveal of her days as a ne'er-do-well Starfleet trainee. Like Trip, I had fun imagining Hoshi breaking the arm of her company commander for breaking up her poker game. It definitely gives us a peek at another side of her character. Sketching in an unexpected bit of backstory 4 years into a series like this isn't a bad idea. It's one way of keeping the characters fresh, reminding the audience that we don't know everything about them. But this scene also has a downside, as it reinforces just how underused Hoshi has been for most of the series. Archer is well written here too. He's not central to the episode, but we see enough of him that when it's time for his pivotal scene at the end with the Organians, it doesn't feel like he was just airdropped in to give the big speech. His plea for compassion rings true, because we've seen him behave with compassion toward Trip and Hoshi in the episode. After Phlox tells Archer that Trip and Hoshi only have a few hours to live, Archer goes to the decon chamber to deliver the news. He tells Trip about the virus and doesn't give him any false hope, but he can't bring himself to tell his best friend that he's probably going to be dead very soon. Later, when Archer and Phlox are racing to save Hoshi and Trip, it's Archer who insists he remove his gloves and helmet to be better able to handle the instruments. He exposes himself to the deadly virus instead of Phlox, because in his words, Enterprise needs a doctor more than it needs a captain. That selflessness and care for his crewmates, also shown in other ways throughout the episode, is what convinces the junior observer to break the rules and interfere to help the crew survive the virus. And I buy that. We see enough of Archer acting compassionately for me to believe that it would mean something to the more sympathetic observer. Sure, there's a lot of the, well, humanity's just special trope getting thrown around here. Apparently, in all their thousands of years of observing species, the Organians have never encountered people who possess compassion for their sick comrades. Like, no other aliens they've watched have had it? Ever? Okay, but the message is still classic Star Trek and still very, very timely. Compassion, empathy, is not a weakness. It's a strength. It's what makes us human. It's what gives life meaning. Anyone who tries to tell you otherwise is a piece of shit who should not be taken seriously and should probably be protested and jeered and made fun of when they play video games badly in public. So those are some of the good parts of the episode. The bad parts mostly have to do with the observers themselves, their behavior, and how they actually come across on screen versus how I think they're supposed to come across. They mention several times that they, specifically the senior observer, have been doing this for a long time, inhabiting bodies, watching corporeal beings deal with infections by this virus, and yet they're still really, really bad at it? I get that Travis's observer is supposed to be relatively new at this, so maybe he can get a pass for being such a blunt and ineffectual interviewer when he goes to talk to Trip and Hoshi about their experiences being infected. But when we see Malcolm's more experienced observer trying to interview Phlox about his research into a treatment, he's not any better at it. He learns nothing and gets kicked out of sickbay almost immediately. But that pales in comparison to the utterly incompetent boneheads the observers show themselves to be when they decide to inhabit the sedated Trip and Hoshi, sit up in bed, and start openly conversing not just about their current mission, but about the nature and history of their species, all while Phlox watches them on a monitor from sickbay. Later on, they say something like, "Oh, well, it's been so long since we've taken physical form, we can't tell the difference between sedation and natural sleep." Okay, first of all, haven't they been observing physical beings who visit this planet in this same way for a long time now? How can they still be such greenhorns at living in physical bodies when they've done it so many times before? Second of all, even if we accept we just forgot the difference between sedation and sleep excuse, did they also forget about cameras and microphones? They know the decon chamber is being monitored. They've been monitoring it themselves as multiple people. But at this crucial stage of their mission, it just slips their minds. I get that the observers need to be discovered at some point, and their discovery leads directly to the scene with Phlox, where he challenges the observers on their policy of non-interference and calls their refusal to help him save Trip and Hoshi appalling, a sentiment Archer returns to later on when he succeeds in convincing them to help. But there must have been a better way to get there than just having the observers start acting like clueless doofuses right when the plot needs them to. Like I said before, it plays to me like a shortcut taken by lazy writers. It's a shame because the writing of most of the rest of the episode is pretty strong. The script was written by Judith and Garfield Reeves Stevens, who I would not call lazy writers, generally speaking. Before joining the Enterprise writing staff in Season 4, their main contribution to Star Trek came in the form of writing a bunch of tie-in novels, including Federation, which I loved and thought was great, and ghostwriting all those William Shatner Star Trek novels, which I loved and thought were terrible. They're definitely way too interested in the lore for my taste, but I certainly wouldn't call them bad writers. In this episode, it felt like they just needed to get where they were going and decided to cheat a little at the expense of their characters. Oh, and speaking of lore, which we often must do when speaking of Enterprise's 4th season, yes, the observers are Organians, and yes, the Organians are a pull from Star Trek, the original series. They appear in the classic episode Errand of Mercy, noteworthy as the introduction of the Klingons. There's really no reason why the observers in this episode need to be Organians. It's an excuse to reference something from another Star Trek show just for the sake of it. I could do without it, but it doesn't bother me all that much here, maybe because I'm just grateful they restrained themselves from going further and, I don't know, naming the observers Aelborn and Claymare, or having one of them predict that despite their opposite natures, one day the humans and the Klingons would become fast friends. They would work together, or some other pandering Metallician indulgence. Observer Effect is directed by Mike Vehar, and of course, the direction is rock solid. Vehar is one of the best TV directors of his generation. He directed a lot of Star Trek, and my only regret is that he didn't direct even more because those greedy bastards at Babylon 5 hired him so much. Vehar is especially good at shooting interiors, which makes him the perfect choice to helm this episode. I especially like the atmospheric use of lighting in the mess hall, decon chamber, and sickbay during the scene when Archer and Phlox are trying to save Hoshi and Trip. The script of this shipbound story stumbles over its own feet a couple of times, but visually it never misses a beat and never feels rote or repetitive. Overall, it's not a bad episode. I liked the characterizations of the observers. I like how the various actors are able to maintain those characterizations as they take turns playing them. And I like how the story ultimately turns on the observers choosing compassion over indifference. The half-assed way the observers give themselves away in the decon chamber sticks in my craw, as does how bad they both seem to be at their jobs when it comes to interacting with the crew. But ultimately, it doesn't ruin the episode, it just dulls the effect. Those are my thoughts on Observer Effect. What do you think of this episode? Please share your thoughts with me in the comments. If you'd like to support this channel, and I sure wish you would, if you can afford it, you can do so by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, becoming a channel member by clicking the join button, or by making a one-time gift by clicking the thanks button, or via PayPal or Venmo. Links are in the description. That wraps it up for the Gods and Monsters batch. Don't worry if I didn't review your favorite episode featuring a godlike or monster-like being. I will come back to this theme in the future. For now, please join me next time as we begin a new batch of episode reviews, this one united by a theme I'm calling Starfleet Gone Bad. Evil admirals, rogue officers, conspiracies, fun stuff. First up is an episode of Star Trek: The Original Series titled Whom Gods Destroy. See you then. Thanks for watching, and take care, everybody.